Wake up, wake up. You've got the power. You've got
my people in the East, yo, you gotta wake up. Midwest, dirty South, yo, you gotta stand up. All my homies in the West, yo, you gotta wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up.
Wake up, everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, all the teachers trying to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. 'Cause they're the ones who's coming up. The world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the best you can.
Scream peace, do we mean it? Can you feel it when we scream it out loud? Do you believe that we need it? Do you believe that it could get right? Do you believe that the children of the world deserve a good life? Well, if you do, it's time to wake up your mind. We can make it better, and I know it might take some time, but we gotta start somewhere. How about with you and me? From us it goes to others, then we'll have our unity.
Wake up, all the doctors make the old people well. They're the ones who suffer, who catch all the hell. But they don't have so very long before the judgment day. So won't you make them happy before they pass away?
Wake up, all the builders, time to build a new land. I know we can do it, long as we lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put it in our blood, and surely things will work out, 'cause they do it
I ain't here to take up y'all time. I came to shake up y'all mind. It's everybody's wake up call time. I can't sleep too long. Why they do the people wrong? Let's clean the world up before they sweep you gone. This is real talk, you can peek through songs. So when you feel weak, these words will keep you strong and help make a change for the better. It's hard for one to do it, but we can make some changes together. We gotta stand up here and give thanks to the man upstairs. Put the egos and the pride to the side regardless, and just be role models, parents, artists. We can make a change or we can make it the hardest. If you gon' make a baby, you should make them the smartest. Let them know good and bad, right from wrong, how to roll with the punches when life moves on. And the stress won't take toll if you don't sweat it. World won't get no better if we don't let it. Let the negative energy ride. Keep hope alive. It's about time that we open our eyes. Wake up.
Everybody, no more sleeping in bed. No more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There's so much hatred, war and poverty. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Yup, well y'all best to vote. I don't care about the guns you tote. Listen to me like you listen to Fahrenheit 9/11. Ain't no time for the second guess. The words I speak, wake up. The ones who sleep in the leadership's fix your mouth to teach. MCs teach the kids with peace. They don't have to worry about the police. We make them rich so they don't have the thief. Every artist here on this track. We'll make a change here for young cats. This is for everybody, white or black. You better go and vote and get up off your back. This life of rolls on, lift your head, get your voice up. You see the power of the people, it's a choice to ignite love. Now the choice is a gift that our people have to fight for. And the fight's far too personal for anyone to ignore. Voice to be heard. Take the opportunity. The responsibility.
Wow, what a great video. Special thank you to Dr. Fleming, who is one of our panelists today, for creating that very inspiring video. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning to those of you who are joining us from different time zones. On behalf of the Center for the Study of Social Policy, Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative at the Annie Casey Foundation, and Montclair State University, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Research Innovations, New Findings, and Practice Implications for Supporting Young Mothers in Foster Care. My name is Lisa Mishraki. I am a Senior Associate at the Center for the Study of Social Policy and will be facilitating the webinar today. We are very excited. You are all going to be hearing from a great panel of speakers that I will be introducing very shortly. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available along with the slides after the presentation. Due to the number of people online, all attendees are in listen-only mode. Throughout the webinar, we invite you to share your ideas and questions through the chat. There will be a Q&A session at the end, and we will be compiling the questions as you submit them for that session. Next slide, please. Before starting, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that regardless of where we currently sit during this webinar, most, if not all of us, are sitting on stolen native lands. I am currently in Brooklyn, New York, occupying the land of the Lenape. You can find out the native land that you're currently sitting on by texting your zip code to the telephone number listed on the screen. At this time, we invite you to please introduce yourself through the chat. Let us know your name, your pronouns, organization, as well as the indigenous land that you're currently occupying. All right, I see some folks from the Children's Village in New York at Inwood's House. University of Oklahoma is represented. I see folks have joined us from Florida, from St. Joseph's Hospital. Madison, Wisconsin is in the house, as well as California, Atlanta, Georgia, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Colorado. This is really great. I see Michigan, in Washington, Hawaii, all right, we'll just take about 15 more seconds to give folks a chance to introduce themselves. And it's great to see that the land acknowledgements. All right, I see Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey. This is really great. All right, keep those introductions coming. And again, just as a reminder, feel free to share ideas and put questions in the chat box. We will be monitoring it and compiling all of those questions for our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. So today there are 3 key results that we hope to achieve. And one is we really want to share with you our findings about the risk and protective factors linked to first and repeat births amongst females transitioning from foster care. We also want you to hear from young mothers with lived experience in foster care about their participation in a research process, as well as their recommendations and lessons learned. And this may be of particular interest to anybody who's interested in replicating this research process. And thirdly, given the research findings, we'd like to talk about implications for practice and to identify concrete action steps to incorporating this information into practice. Next slide, please. We have a great group of presenters and colleagues for you all today, and I'm going to take a moment to introduce them. Blanca Gotes is a Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Young Fellow and a faculty member of the Pregnancy Prevention and Parenting Support Virtual Resource Center. She has served on the National Youth in Transition Database Reviewers Team, where she assisted child welfare specialists with exploring new and innovative ways to help young people successfully transition from foster care. Ms. Gotes has served on the National Advisory Committee for the Jim Casey Initiative and works on various projects such as prioritizing policy issues, analyzing opportunity passport data, and contributing to strategic planning efforts. Sheila Van Bort is a social worker, a Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Young Fellow, and a faculty member of the Pregnancy Prevention and Parenting Support Virtual Resource Center. She has worked as a child case manager and managed a youth in transition mentoring program for older youth in foster care. Ms. Van Bort served as the president of Michigan's Youth Opportunities Initiative for 6 years and has educated and advocated locally and at the state level for foster care policy changes. Dr. Svetlana Spiegel is an associate professor and MSW program director at Montclair State University in New Jersey. Her research focuses on adolescents and young adults emancipating from foster care. Dr. Spiegel's publications have appeared in the Journal of Adolescent Health, Children and Youth Services Review, and the International Journal of Mental Health and Addiction. She is currently involved in a number of research projects examining the well-being of adolescents emancipating from foster care, with a specific focus on parenting youth. And last, but definitely not least, is Dr. Fleming, who is a senior associate at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Her work at the foundation is focused on preventing untimely pregnancies in youth and young adults and supporting the developmental needs and networks of support for young parents. She has a particular interest in integrating comprehensive reproductive health and parenting support strategies in public systems and institutions. Dr. Fleming's career expands over 25 years, from her work as a community organizer to developing and implementing multiple community-based health and social service initiatives. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Fleming.
Next slide, please. Thanks, Lisa. Hello, everyone. I am extremely excited that today we are able to share about the research process, the findings, and the implications for policies, practices, and program services for expectant and parenting youth. I'd like to start us off by briefly providing some background about the research and the process. Again, my name is Tammy Fleming, and I'm a member of the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative. For those who are not familiar with our work, the Jim Casey Initiative is a systems change effort designed to dramatically improve how communities and states respond to the needs of young people who are transitioning from foster care to adulthood. One of our key indicator areas for the program is pregnancy prevention and parenting support. The result for this indicator is to ensure that young people have the information, the skills to make informed decisions about whether and when to become parents. And for those who are parents, to make sure that they have the supports and resources to raise healthy children. With the recognition that females with foster care backgrounds are vulnerable to childbirth, we know this is a widely known fact, and that these females have rates that are 2 to 3 times higher than females of the same age who do not have lived experience in foster care. While we know this much, little is known about repeat childbirth in this population. We know that they are at a heightened risk, but up until now, there are no known studies that have explored the risk factors for repeat births. Why is this important? Well, quite simply, if our ultimate goal is to ensure that all youth transitioning to adulthood from foster care have the information, skills, and resources needed to succeed, then we need to better understand the consequence of transitioning to independence while caring for multiple children. And it is with this backdrop that we partnered with Montclair State University, the Center for the Study of Social Policy, and the 2 young parents with lived experience to study this issue. Next slide. I'd like to add one additional context factor. For the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative and throughout the Casey Foundation, we aspire wholeheartedly for authentic youth and community engagement in all of our efforts. The partnership and the recognition that the leadership and solutions for many of the issues we face are embedded in these populations. And for expectant and parenting youth, here are some key factors to look for in a successful partnership. First and foremost, recognizing the right of every young parent to raise their own child, treating them as equal partners with shared power and acknowledging their expertise and their lived experience. It requires sharing information, it requires having honest conversations, and respecting their opinions and perspectives. It also requires us to build self-esteem and leadership skills in expectant and parenting youth that they will need in adulthood. With that, I'd like to welcome Sheila and Blanca, the 2 phenomenal young parents who work with us on this study.
Hello.
Hi, Blanca. Hi, Sheila.
Hello.
I'd like to start us off first by having maybe, Sheila, maybe you could start us off. Tell us what the experience was like and the process for getting ready to do the study, maybe about the reviewing of the articles or so forth.
Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit easy to get started, just because with going to school for social work, I had a little bit of background in research. But along the way, I realized that as much as I thought I knew, there was that much more that I didn't know. And so having the ability to have a team of people to be able to go through these articles, and it's amazing how when there's one word in an article that you don't understand or it makes you feel some type of way, it really throws off the whole section. And so having that opportunity to sit down, and sometimes it would take a whole meeting to talk about the terminology and why something's used a certain way, and that really helped shape how we designed our articles and how we designed the work that we did. And so yeah, it was challenging at times, very difficult to pace yourself. It was really a time management thing of being able to tell yourself that you have to review these articles, but you're going to have time to do it in depth. So don't spend too much time on one article or the other, because you will have time. And so learning time management and just really having that teamwork was one of the highlights of doing this work.
Great. How about you, Blanca?
For me, it was a terrifying experience, if I'm perfectly honest, going into it, because I didn't have the background of research at all. And I have this like brain mechanism where if I see a lot of technical terms or big words, it like shuts down and I start panicking. So I knew that that's what was going to happen with doing research work. because I've read research articles before. So it was really nice to have a team of people that I could, you know, very comfortably be like, okay, I don't understand any of what this means. You know, can we like go into it and break it apart piece by piece and figure out what all of it means so that I can understand it and be able to do my job better, and felt no judgment whatsoever to do that. So that was honestly like the best part of it all.
Let's go back to you, Sheila. Would you talk a little bit about the flexibility of working with you and Blanca in the evenings or on the weekends, and what that meant to your contribution?
So when I first started this work, I was a little bit worried because for the last year, I have been a stay-at-home mom, which has been a new thing for me. And I tell you, when you have a almost 4-year-old, you never know what's going to happen. Things always change. And so the flexibility really honestly was probably the biggest factor in this, just because it made it where we were able to do this work. So if that meant having meetings at 9 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then after meeting for so long on Tuesdays and Thursdays and that wasn't working out, we switched to Sunday afternoons. Sometimes right when we're getting ready to start a meeting, something comes up and we have to change it. And so the important thing was that we still got the work done in the time frame that we set. And so that was really phenomenal, actually, because I felt like we had to reschedule and cancel and reschedule so many times. And then next thing you know, like we have this whole article done. And so it took a lot of stress away from that anxiety of, I feel like I'm not doing enough. Being able to be flexible, being able to say, hey, I don't understand something. Can I call or text you? And having that flexibility of doing that, of having your kid run on the screen in the middle of a conversation and you get sidetracked for a little bit. All of those things were important because it made us feel like we were doing something important and our family still mattered.
Yeah. What about you, Blanca? I feel like your babies were a part of the team.
So I agree entirely with what Sheila said. I think for me, it was honestly such a like sigh of relief to be able to have that flexibility, because I have 2 young ones. One's going to be 4 next month and the other one's only a year and a half old. So like things get really hectic in this house sometimes. So for me to be able to have the comfort to say like, hey guys, I can't meet tonight because, you know, one of the kids is sick, or you know what, give me like 10 minutes. I'm going to be a little bit late because I'm trying to put them down for bed, was a lot easier. With it, I also liked the flexibility of being able to like, you know, email back and forth or text back and forth when anything came up that we couldn't make calls, or, you know, if something, you know, that like the past couple of months have been crazy. And there were times when we were like, hey, do we want to just do like a check-in call, make sure everyone's doing good, like emotionally and mentally. And that to me meant the world, because it really distinguished this project as being something more than just a project, and more about, okay, we want the work to get done, but we want to make sure that you guys aren't burning yourselves out either.
Authentic and guys.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's transition a little bit to content. Sheila, let me ask you this. Why is it important to involve expectant and parenting youth in research that is about them?
Well, one is that they need to be able to identify and understand like where they're falling in. And so one of the things that Blanca and I realized is that sometimes terminology in research it reads different to researchers versus people who are just like a regular eye looking at the paper. And so us being able to sit down and say, hey, so I never thought that I was considered, you know, mentally challenged. And then when you break it down and you realize like what it means to a researcher and what it means to a person who actually has lived experiences is totally different. And so the reason it's important to have them involved is key. I mean, it literally changed the direction of how we wrote the rest of the article, to be able to accommodate different crowds of people and audiences that would be reading this, so that we could still get our research across, while still feeling, research can be very intimidating to some people, but this research is so important, especially for young people. And so having them involved in it makes it real, makes the research very real and not just a number. And so that has been what's been really important, is that we like to be able to say, we helped write this, like we did this in the midst of COVID, in the midst of being at home with our kids, like we did this. And that is why it is important to have young people involved in research.
Right. Thank you, Sheila. I'll come back to you later in the presentation, but Blanca, let me ask you a question. What about, I know one of the things that you and Sheila brought up early on was the lack of data on fathers and the need for additional research. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think we were both equally shocked when we realized that there wasn't like very little research on fathers, because of the fact that, like, for me, I know it shocked me because with parenting you have both. You know, like you don't just have like just the mother and that's it. And I think for us it was just very shocking because a lot of times fathers don't get the same services and options as young mothers do. And so I think we both kind of early on were like, you know, it'd be interesting to see what the options and you know, like turnouts were for the young fathers about like surrounding, you know, their experiences in care, being young fathers, things of that nature, especially the fact that young fathers oftentimes when they're in care don't really know that they have little ones as well, because, you know, either the state manipulates it or what have you. So I think that's where we were with that, is we were just very shocked and I would say even disappointed that there wasn't any actual like foundation of information for young fathers.
Yeah, thank you both. We're going to have you guys join us again later on, but right now I want to turn it back over to Lisa. Lisa?
Thank you, Sheila and Blanca, for those great insights. And you are absolutely right that you know, your feedback and your insights completely changed the direction of the research, and we really appreciate that. In developing our research question, we first examined all of the relevant theories and frameworks that related to positive youth development or supporting expectant and parenting youth. And, you know, we just want to quickly summarize the things that we learned that help frame the direction of our research. And so we know that adolescence is a very critical period of brain development. We know that experiences shape the brain development. We also know about the impact of trauma and the importance of nurturing relationships and healing-centered engagement. Expectant and parenting youth face multiple obstacles balancing their own transition to adulthood while raising a child. And for young people in the foster care system and those who have recently transitioned out of care, the challenges are even greater, and the resources available to help are frequently scarce and not at all developmentally informed. Multi-generational and developmentally informed strategies are critical to supporting the dual transitions of expectant and parenting youth so they and their families can succeed and thrive. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite slides to show when talking about adolescent brain development, because it clearly depicts the gap in timing where the prefrontal cortex, the turtle, which is related to planning, thinking about consequences, decision-making, and logic, is slowly developing, while the limbic system, represented by the rabbit, which is all about thrill-seeking, risk-taking, it's all about the moment, the here and now, is full steam ahead. And this knowledge is really important because not only does it help us understand that much of what happens during adolescence is brain-based, it also requires us to think differently about how we respond to the young people we support. Applying this knowledge to our practice assures that we are developing environments and opportunities that support optimal brain development and well-being for these young families. Next slide, please. So I like to include this slide in presentation. This is a copy of a comic strip from a newspaper, because I think it clearly showcases the example of how environments and experiences impact development. And so what you'll see, and I'll read it just in case it is not clear for folks. So on the one side, there's a white boy and he says, "I'm going out, Mom." And the mom's response is, "Put on your jacket." Then on the other side, there is a black boy. He says, "I'm going out, Mom." And the mom's response is, "Put on your jacket, keep your hands in sight at all times, don't make any sudden moves, keep your mouth shut around the police, don't run, don't wear a hoodie," and it goes on and on and on and on and on. And so this is really a powerful way of making sure that we are mindful of the ways in which power, privilege, and race impact the lives of expectant and parenting youth, and especially expectant and parenting youth of color, and the ways that we can support their healing. Next slide, please. So protective factors are what the research tells us all youth, including expectant and parenting youth, need to succeed and thrive. And strengthening these factors throughout development is the pathway to well-being for these young families. And I just really like this quote from Dr. Bell from the University of Illinois, and I'll just read it out loud, which says that risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. Next slide, please. So the protective factors are 5 interrelated variables that reduce the impact of negative life experiences and advance healthy development and well-being. I'm going to quickly define each one, but on our website, there is a wealth of information on how to best support young families as well as youth and young adults in building them. And so we'll start with resilience. And resilience is really the process of positive adaptation, coping, problem solving, becoming more resourceful, and functioning well despite experiencing significant challenges, adversity, or trauma. It is not a personality trait. Rather, it involves positive behaviors and attitudes that one has or can develop. Social connections. Social connections are young people's healthy and sustained relationships with caring and supportive family members, adults, peers. And it's also about physically and emotionally safe, stable, and equitable environments such as schools, neighborhoods, community-based organizations that provide opportunities for constructive engagement as learners, leaders, team members, and coworkers. Social connections also includes the belief in a higher power, which supports young people in finding meaning and positive purpose in their lives. Healthy social connections help to promote a sense of trust, belonging, and a belief that one matters. Knowledge of parenting and development refers to the importance for youth and young adults and those who support them to have accurate knowledge about the unique aspects of adolescent development. Because beliefs about an attitude towards youth and young adults influence how they are perceived and treated. Young people themselves also benefit from increasing their understanding about their own development and the development of their children, because this helps to normalize their individual experiences as developmentally typical. It's also about understanding child development and setting the young parents up for success. Concrete supports in time of need refers to help-seeking behavior, access to developmentally informed services, and high-quality resources and services that are tailored to the unique developmental stage. Concrete support should be provided in a manner that preserves young people's dignity and provides opportunities for them to learn to advocate for themselves and help minimize the impact of adversity and traumatic experiences. And last but not least is cognitive and social emotional competencies. And this refers to the knowledge and attitudes that lay the foundation for learning skills, problem solving and decision making, forming an independent identity, communicating, collaborating with others, and having a productive and satisfying adulthood. So I know that that was a lot in a very short period of time, but I just want to point that we have a lot of resources on our website if you are interested. And so at this time, we are going to do a polling question. Okay. So hopefully everybody's able to see the poll. Let me know if you can't. And the polling question is, which of the risk factors below do you think is most correlated to first and repeat births among youth in foster care? And you can only select one from the options that are listed. And I see folks are voting already, which is great. All right, so we'll take about 30 more seconds for folks to vote. And we're seeing a lot of great comments in the chat. Please keep those coming. It's a space where we can share ideas, feedback, and ask questions. All right, about 15 more seconds. And we're seeing a lot of messages in the chat about additional factors, and you're absolutely right. We didn't list all of them, so this is not at all a comprehensive list. We just picked some, and then we're going to be talking about this more when we discuss our findings. All right, so I'm going to end the polling. Let's see. So I hope everybody can see the results. So sounds like placement instability while in foster care was the highest, with about 50% of folks, followed by disconnection from education, job training, and employment. And there was a bit of a tie between early exit from foster care and homelessness. And I know that a lot of people have mentioned lack of social support and lack of social connections, which is absolutely another factor in the chat. So that's really great. Okay. And now I am going to turn it over to Svetlana for the really exciting part to talk about our research design and to talk about our findings.
Thank you, Lisa. I don't know if that's the most exciting part, or I think the most exciting part is to hear from our young parents. But nevertheless, I do want to tell you a little bit about this research. So as Lisa mentioned before, the goal was to look at both first and repeat births among girls that age out of foster care. And we specifically wanted to look at the period of transition to adulthood, right? So we wanted to look at first and repeat births between ages 19 and 21. Whereas some of the earlier research on this topic, a lot of it focused on adolescence, right? So up until age 19. So we wanted to go a little bit beyond that, because we know from prior studies that actually the period of transition to adulthood is where a lot of these births happen, right? There is a substantial increase in birth rates in this time period. And then as Lisa mentioned, there is not a lot of research on repeat births. So there's actually one good study that has looked at it. They only looked until age 20 and didn't include some of the risk and protective factors that we're looking at the individual level. So there is not a lot of research on this, but there is conceptually an understanding that youth seem to have multiple bursts during this period of transition to adulthood. So we wanted to look at that a little bit more closely. So what did we do? We used two administrative data sets, the National Youth and Transition Database and the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis and Reported System. So NITAD and AFCARS, some of you might be familiar with these data sets. And these data sets actually can be linked using a child identifier because they're somewhat different in their focus. NITAD collects data on outcomes of young people who age out of foster care. So it starts at age 17, follows youth at ages 19 and 21. And AFCARS has information on their earlier experiences in the child welfare system, right? So things like placement type, placement stability, reasons for their entry, and things like that. So when you link both of these together, you get a more comprehensive picture of the functioning and the experiences of these young people. So who did we include in our study? We included only girls. We could talk a little bit later about why that is, but only girls at this point who participated in all three waves of NITAD, and we selected the cohort that started in 2014. So these are youth who were 17 years old in 2014, and they were followed at age then 19 and 21. And we have a little bit over 3,600 females who met this inclusion criteria of participating in all three waves of data collection. And then we, as I've said, looked at first and repeat births in the period of 19 to 21. And we looked at risk, protective, and some child welfare factors and how they are related to first and repeat birth at this time period. Taisha, if you could scroll over to the next one, thank you. So how did we define our dependent variable, which was childbirth status, right? As I've said, we looked at childbirth between ages 19 and 21. At age 21, youth were asked, have you given birth in the previous 2 years, right? So looking at that age 21 variable, we're actually looking back on a 2-year period. And all youth who said, yes, have given birth, we then divided them to whether or not they had reported a previous birth, either at age 17 or before, right? Or I'm sorry, either at age 19 or at age 17 or before, right? So if they did report a previous birth, then at ages 19 to 21, they were considered to have a repeat birth. If they did not, then they were considered to have a first birth at this time period. And if they didn't have any births, then they did not, right? They didn't give birth between ages 19 and 21. And then in terms of risk and protective factors and some child welfare factors, we looked at disconnection from school and employment at age 19. And we also looked at their histories of homelessness, substance abuse referrals, and incarceration. We looked at it at age 19, but those refer to 2-year previous, right? So between ages 17 and 19. And then in terms of protective factors, we looked at having a high school diploma or GED or a higher certificate at age 19, and then receiving educational financial assistance and having a supportive adult at age 19. And the reason why we chose those variables is because in some prior studies, they were considered important, not just for foster youth, but also for teen moms in general, right? For instance, we know that there is a relationship between education and childbirth, right? That relationship has been demonstrated in studies that were both on foster youth, but also in the general population. And then we also looked at some child welfare factors, specifically placement type and stability that was evaluated at age 17. And also the age of the most recent entry into care, also evaluated at age 17, and whether or not they were still in care at age 19, okay? So again, those were the factors that we believed would be associated with either having a first birth, a repeat birth, or not given birth at ages 19 to 21. If I could have the next slide. So this is just a general description of the race and ethnicity of the girls that were included in our sample. You could see that about 40% were non-Hispanic white, about a little bit over 30% were Black, a little bit over 20% were Hispanic, and about 5% were of other races, which were Native American, Alaska Native, Hawaiian, other Pacific Islander, or Asian. So that's that's the breakout of the racial and ethnic identities of these girls. Then if I could have the next slide. So this slide represents how many of these girls said that they have given birth at least once, right? Over the waves of NITED. So the first wave of NITED at age 17 asks about any births before age 17, right? So did you ever give birth? And then at age 19, they're asked if they had given birth in the previous 2 years, right? So between ages 17 and 19. And as I've said before, at age 21, they're asked about the past 2 years also between ages 19 and 21. And if you look at any of them, about a little bit below 40% reported that they had given birth at least once, okay? And then if I could have the next slide, you could see at the different ages, how many youth reported childbirth. So slightly below 7% said that they've given birth before age 17, right? So when they were asked at age 17, have you given birth? Slightly below 7% said yes. And then close to 15% said that they've given birth between ages 17 and 19. And about 30%, which you could kind of see how this increases, right? That's not surprising, but really visually apparent how that percentage increases. So about 30% have given birth between ages 19 and 21. And then if I could have the next slide. So I'm not going to get into a tremendous depth in terms of analysis. I'm happy to talk with anybody who is interested in more detail. But what we wanted to do here is just to convey some major findings. So remember that 30% of females that said, yes, I've given birth between ages 19 to 21, of those females, right, which is a little bit over 1,000, about 1/3 had a previous birth. And then when we looked at when did these previous births happen, right? Did they happen before age 17, between ages 17 and 19? We've seen that the majority, a little bit less than 90%, but the vast majority of these previous births have occurred between ages 17 and 19. So what does that mean? That actually means that during this vulnerable period of transition to adulthood between ages 17 and 21, a proportion of these young females, they give birth more than one time, right? Multiple births. Now, we don't even know if this means 2 kids or 3 or more, right? NITED doesn't ask about the number of children, so we don't know that information. But we know that they at least have given birth twice, right? It's probably 2 children, but could it be 3? Could it be 4? Absolutely, right? So a substantial proportion of these girls give birth multiple times between ages 17 and 21. And if you think about it, it's a vulnerable period for this youth anyway, right? This is the period where they emancipate from foster care, they are negotiating their independence, and they have to negotiate new motherhood, and they have to negotiate parenting multiple children, while also trying to get their education, to get employment, right? And really become independent adults, and losing some of the supports and services that they got when they were involved with the child welfare system. So this is quite a substantial strain on those mothers, and I think really demonstrates that they need support. If I could get to our next slide. So then we've done some multivariate analysis, multinomial logistic regression, and we wanted to take a look at these factors, right? Remember those risk, protective, and child welfare factors that relate to either first or repeat births between ages 19 and 21. And what we found is all the factors that we studied in bivariate analysis, they were all significantly associated with higher rates of first and repeat births, right? So for instance, if a youth was disconnected from school and employment at age 19, they had higher rates of both first and repeat birth at between ages 19 and 21. If they were homeless, the same. If they reported substance use referrals, the same. All of these were significant. However, in multivariate analysis, when you put all of that together and you try to determine, well, which of these factors are important, are kind of most important while you account for other factors, right? What we found is that the most important factors in terms of risk were disconnection from school and employment at age 19, earlier exit from care, right? So being already discharged from care by age 19, and higher placement instability. And that was associated with higher risk of both first and repeat births, right? In terms of protective factors, again, they were all significant in bivariate analysis, but when we look at the most important factors, receiving educational financial assistance was really the one that was significantly associated with lower rates of both first and repeat births. And receiving this assistance means that, most likely means that these youth are enrolled in some kind of a post-secondary education program, right? That's why they're receiving the assistance. So this really emphasizes the relationship between education and birth, right? So that is highlighted in the disconnection variable, but also in this variable of financial assistance. And that actually makes sense because we know from research in the general population, when females especially perceive that they have prospects educationally and financially, they say, maybe I'm going to delay birth because I want to finish my school. I want to get this good job, and then I'm going to give birth when I'm more ready. But if there are no they're disconnected, so they perceive that they're not going to attain educational success, they're not going to attain financial success, then they kind of say, well, I have nothing to lose, right? I'm going to become a mother. So we know that from research on non-foster youth, and these findings suggest that this might also apply to youth in care. And then, interestingly enough, there weren't a lot of differences between, weren't a lot of factors that were uniquely associated with repeat births. But the ones that were having already having a high school diploma or GED, or another educational certificate at age 19, and older age of entry to care. And again, we kind of, when we talked about it, we think that the reason for that is some of these young moms, if they already have a child, right, and they get a GED, and they get some kind of a certificate, they might say, okay, I'm either going to enter the workforce, or I'm going to enroll in higher education and continue my education, and I'm going to delay birth so I could potentially support my existing child better, right? So that's why it decreased the likelihood of a repeat birth, but not necessarily of a first birth, right? So again, these are just hypotheses. We don't know this for sure, but that's what we thought. And in terms of older age of entry to care, we know that some girls enter care at an older age because they're already pregnant, right? Because they were potentially kicked out of their placement, of their biological families, right? The family said, no, I don't want you to be here. So they might enter care when they're already pregnant. And that's why this older age of entry to care potentially is associated with repeat birth, but not necessarily first birth. And if we could have the next slide. So I just want to briefly mention, and Lisa, can you tell me how much time I have left? Because I feel like I'm going over a little bit.
You're good.
I'm good? Okay. I could talk about data for forever. So just tell me when I'm going over. So in terms of implications for practice, I think that when we talked about this, one of the things that we want to mention is this period of emerging adulthood, right? Which the period of 17 to 21 falls within that, right? It's when youth they crave independence. They need independence. They want to become more independent, but they're not completely independent yet, right? They rely, and we know about youth in the general population, they're certainly reliant on their parents at this age, right? We were all 17 and 18 and 19, and we relied on our parents in a very significant way. But if you think of youth in care, right, some of them might feel, well, I want to be independent. And one of our participants in the chat box mentioned, I don't want the surveillance that's associated with the child welfare system. There are a lot of strings attached that constrains my independence. So I'm going to go ahead and age out, even though it disadvantages them actually in terms of outcomes. So to prevent that from happening, right, we need to really, this third bullet point here, we need to have a changed relationship with youth during this time period, right? So we want to offer support, but in a way that a young adult is actually going to accept it, right? Not to have so many strings attached to that support that they might say, it's not worth it for me. I don't want this. I'm going to be out. The other thing that we want to mention is we want to focus on protective factors, right? So we know the risks. We know that these girls are at risk for having detrimental outcomes. And we really want to make sure that we're building protective factors around them so that either we could prevent birth if it's an unplanned pregnancy, right? Or we could support the girls that decide, yes, I want to be pregnant. I want to give birth to this baby, and we want to support those youth. So as you see here, this dual focus is really needed. There are some pregnancy prevention programs that mostly target youth who don't have children. We know for this population, we really also need to target youth who already have kids, right? Because we might want to prevent unplanned pregnancies later on, so they don't age out of care with multiple kids, which makes it much harder for them to become independent potentially, right? So that's really that's really important. And if I could have the next slide, I could tell you a little bit in terms of, well, what can you actually do, right? So this research, I think, lends itself really well to something that we call the 4 S's, right? Stability, schools, support, and staying in care. So in terms of stability, we have a lot of research on placement stability and how that is associated with better outcomes for youth, and that includes childbirth, right? So placement stability was a significant predictor of first and repeat birth. The more instability youth experienced, the more likely they were to give birth for the first time, or for not the first time, between ages 19 and 21. So we want to keep them stable in placements. And that also, by the way, relates to keeping them stable in schools, because school transitions are also quite detrimental for youth. Which again brings us to the second bullet point here, the second S, and that's school. We want to keep youth connected to educational settings as much as possible, right? So keeping youth in school is probably one of the more effective mechanisms to prevent unplanned pregnancies and birth, because when youth are invested in their education, they might think about this more, right? And they might be more likely to delay births. In terms of support, from our and Blanca and Sheila are going to weigh in on this in a second, but from our conversations, we talked several times about the kinds of support that young mothers need and young people need in general when they age out of care. One of the things that's really important is to have adults that they could talk about sex with, right? If they're not able to talk about their sexual and reproductive health, what they know and don't know about contraception, about how to avoid pregnancies, and how to get them, right? That's detrimental for you. They need to be talked about these topics, preferably before the period of transition to adulthood, but during this period also. And also supporting them instrumentally, right? Support in terms of assistance to go to school, that financial aid aspect of it, that's really important. And then last, but certainly not least, encourage young people to stay in care. The longer, the better. We have so much data from all sorts of studies, very good, both national and statewide studies that show if youth stay in care longer, their outcomes are going to be better. So maybe Sheila and Blanca can weigh in a little bit on why sometimes youth exit care earlier, right? And how staying in care might help them potentially achieve better outcomes. So at this point, I'm gonna give it back to Sheila and Blanca. Maybe you could weigh in on some of these S's and how they could help.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with the fact that stability is so important in every other one of the S's. So stability in school, stability and support. So it's one thing to just support someone at the beginning of a process, and it's another thing to support someone through the entire process. Part of the reason, like I said at the beginning, I've worked with young people in care for a few years, and one of the biggest issues that young people say they don't want to stay in care is exactly that. They don't want the supervision of someone constantly being in their life and trying to make decisions for them. And they just want that. I want to get away. I don't want to have to deal with a caseworker. I don't want to have to deal with all these things. But the reality is that there's this disconnect of the information given to young people. So being in extended care isn't like being in foster care. It's much different. It's much more independent and very individualized based on the needs of the individual young person. You don't have a foster parent telling you what you can and can't do. It's you making decisions, and you have a worker who meets with you to make sure you're staying on track with what your goals are. And so there's a lot of different things that go into, but a lot of kids get told, I'm always going to be there for you. I'm always going to be there for you. And then when they actually need the person who said they're going to be there, there's nobody there to be there for them. So why would they continue to stay in a system that has consistently failed them along the way? And so I think it's important that we are relaying these information about the different programs and what their options are, and that they have these options, that your option isn't just to get out of care, because the financial support you receive for the 4 years or whatever it is, each state's a little bit different, but for the support that you see, the financial support you receive is detrimental to really transitioning into adulthood, and can kind of help curb the homelessness. It teaches you the basics and things like that. And so it's so important to think about stability really is important in all of these, because you have to keep school stable. Life happens. They have to have encouragement. When you fail your first exam and you have nobody that you can call and say, this happened to me, I don't know what I'm going to do. Or when you pass your first test that you thought you were going to fail, like, you have to have someone there to support and encourage you along the way. And so that's why all of these are so important, to be able to change these outcomes and hopefully prevent the unplanned spread of repeat births.
Thank you, Sheila. We have quite a few questions, and I'll start to filter through them. One of the first questions, Svetlana, this may be for you. Are closely spaced births also common in young women not involved in foster care?
So this is a good question. Yeah, so there certainly are. There is research on young moms, teen moms, young moms, who, and that research does find that closely spaced births tend to happen. And it also finds there are a couple of studies that look at the outcomes of moms who did report closely spaced births and those who did not. Right, and the outcomes, there are some detrimental outcomes associated with closely spaced repeat births, right? So for instance, there is research on in terms of education and employment, and how that could become difficult when there are multiple children, young children to care for. Also, there is some research that I've seen in terms of prenatal care. Sometimes when there are closely spaced repeat births, these moms are not necessarily seeking prenatal care, and that could have some association with outcomes like low birth weight and other things when they give birth for the second time. So yeah, the short answer is yes, it does happen to teen moms, and it is associated with detrimental outcomes for these young moms. And the next step for this process is to see, well, is this associated with detrimental outcomes for these foster youth, right? Are their outcomes worse when they are having multiple children? NITED is not necessarily the best data set to study it. I think Ideally, we need data that goes beyond age 21, right? Because one of the things that we've seen is that if you look at outcomes of moms, you could certainly see that their outcomes in terms of education, employment, homelessness, they're worse than non-moms. But it only, from some of the studies that both I did and also that I've read, there is a catch-up effect there. So the outcomes tend to be worse in the short term, but it's not clear at all that they're substantially worse in the long term for foster youth. So that is an open question. And we need more data that goes beyond age 21 to look at that. So I hope
Thank you, Svetlana. I have another question, and Lisa, maybe you want to tackle this one. What resources are presented to young parents around child development?
Yeah, so there are a lot of resources that include training that are targeted at young parents, but there's also a really great resource. It's a co-parenting intervention. Essentially, it's a co-parenting workshop that New York City's child welfare system developed that is targeted at expectant and parenting youth in foster care, and really translates all of that information on early childhood development in a way that young parents are able to receive it. And not only does it focus on the early childhood piece, but it also focuses on helping them understand where they are in their own development. So those are a couple of the resources that I can think of in terms of training, in terms of workshop. There's also several publications and materials as well. And if others are aware of any other resources, please share them through the chat, and we can compile all of this information and share it afterwards.
And one other thing I wanted to add is home visiting programs, right? So home visiting programs could be really great for this population because they are intended to give information about child development and are intended for young, high-risk moms, right? So there is a lot of overlap, and I'm not familiar with studies that looked at this specifically, but I think more attention should be paid to home visiting programs.
I'm going to ask Sheila and then Svetlana to tackle this one. There was a question about, can you say more about how the young parents with lived experience influenced or impacted the study?
So I would have to say, just like emphasizing on what I said earlier, it makes the research real. So I was a part of that data. I had my daughter. I got pregnant with her at 18. I had her at 19. I didn't have the supports I should have with school, and I flunked out of college the first time. And so, like, being able to put a face to the research and realizing, like, they're not just numbers. Like, these are people with real experiences that they've gone through, and us being able to give real life feedback. And Svetlana can speak on this if she wants, but there's been plenty of times where she's mentioned having us just be able to have open conversations about terminology, about how something is stated or worded in the article. Really reshaped it. And so I'm gonna let Svetlana take over.
Well, I'm going to share one example that I've shared before in our conversations. So in our earlier iterations of this article, we looked at several different variables that could potentially be associated with birth. And one of the variables in AFCARS is called emotionally disturbed, right? And that really just means a DSM diagnosis, right? But that's the name of the variable, and that's the name that I used to stay faithful to the secondary data that I'm using. And Sheila and Blanca were like, emotionally disturbed. That's not a good name. That's stigmatizing. Even if youth have mental health challenges, that is not a good way to address them, right? So this was really important and eye-opening because I've used this variable. This particular research, we ended up not using it, but I've used this variable before and labeled it as such, and I'm not going to do it again. I've since written another article that that had this variable, and I have not labeled it as such. So it's truly a partnership, right? It's not just us kind of helping youth read this research. It's really them helping us think about some of the things that might turn people off, right? That might turn youth off and say, well, this is not about me. This doesn't represent me because this language doesn't represent me.
Yeah, I think I'll add just a bit and step out of facilitator mode. I think it helped us to think about how we even asked the question that we were going to study by having Sheila and Blanca at the table, really helping us to frame the question in a way that was more supportive and positive, and thinking about, you know, if young people decide they want to be parents, what do we do to help them to do that well? And so it really helped us to think about the wording and the framing of the questions, having them at the table. Lisa, someone is asking about the New York City program. If someone is on, can you give the name of that program? And I also wonder if this is an opportunity for you guys to talk a little bit about Family First and some of the opportunities for those who are serving young people in foster care, but also preventing some young parents from going into care.
So I put the information in the chat, and I see that there's a lot of questions. So let's, I'll try as much as possible to respond in the chat so that we can take some of the questions for Svetlana and Sheila.
Right. So Svetlana, you want to speak a little bit to the Family First?
Well, so youth who are parenting, right? They're explicitly addressed in the Family First legislation, right? So there's some opportunities there, and also in terms of evidence-based programs, right? Home visiting programs are evidence-based, and I think there's some opportunities to potentially target some of these programs for this specific population and have funding to do so. I think Lisa is probably going to be, I know you guys did the Center for Social Policy, you did training on Family First, so you might be better suited to address some of the practicalities of the legislation. But I do know that it is a priority population, right? And this emphasis on evidence-based programs, which Family First has, I think presents some opportunities for supporting these parents and having the funding to do so, right?
There is a question that asks, could you comment on the prevalence of parents with disabilities amongst the parents and the appropriateness of resources for these parents?
That is an excellent question. I have actually been interested in this topic and tried to look at it using some of these existing data. And unfortunately, the sample was just not enough to do anything. So in fact, AFCARS identifies youth with disabilities, and there is a way to see how many of these moms have disabilities. There's some issues with that. AFCARS defines disabilities in ways that they're a little bit messy. So initially I wanted to look only at cognitive impairment because there is a specific and relatively well-defined variable that relates to that. However, it just wasn't enough. They're too small of a sample. I do know I have a colleague who works on this specific topic in terms of young moms with disabilities, not necessarily those involved in the child welfare system, but young moms in general who have disabilities. And she comments quite frequently on how they face unique challenges, right? They want to keep their kids. A lot of the times they need substantial supports to keep their kids. And many times they end up losing their kids because they didn't have the supports that they need. And again, I'm talking mostly about cognitive disability there, right? There are other types of disabilities. So the short question there is, I don't have data on that. I don't know the prevalence. I have never seen a study looking at moms with disabilities in care, right? I would love to look at that topic, but unfortunately, I have not found any data to even give us initial indication of what this would be. But I think it's the right emphasis, and I think it's good to take a look at that.
So we have time for one more question. I'm going to throw that one to Sheila, but we will compile all the questions and send out responses with the link to the video. Sheila, I'd like to let you have the last question here. There is, someone asked, how does socio-cultural peer influence or messages impact the decisions for extended care?
Oh, I think that it has more of an impact than a worker or someone else, simply because word of mouth always works. It doesn't matter what situation it is, word of mouth always seems to get people. So if you go to some place and you have a bad experience and you tell your friends, hey, this happened, I had a bad experience, they're most likely not going to go there. So it's the same thing. If you have a young person who went through care and didn't have a good experience, and now they're telling other people about, hey, you know, I did extended care, it didn't work out, these were the flaws, I definitely think that that benefit, like that, has an impact on what that young person does, which is why it's so important that peers are involved in this, because peers who have had, I'm going to just say this, there's not a program out there that is perfect. There's always going to be a program that fails a child in one way or the other, whether it was intentional or unintentional. So that happens. There is no perfect way to make sure everybody gets everything they need. But peer support is so important. When I can talk to young people, that has always been my thing. With lived experiences and being a social worker, I can talk to young people and say, hey, I've been there. This is what I did. This is what I struggled with. This is what I wish I had help with. Let me help you. That gets it. They listen. They listen. They're willing to do the work. When they can see that, wow, she did it. Like, she was in foster care. Her adoption failed and she still went to college. It didn't go the best. I always tell people that all the time. It's so important to talk about your failures, because you cannot have success without failure. And they need to know that failure happens and that you can get through failure. If I wouldn't have had my mentors during my college times of failing tests and succeeding, I don't know that I would have actually finished school. And so it's so important to have peers involved. And when peers have bad experiences, it leads young people to not want to go and have that same experience.
Well, thank you, Sheila. Taisha, can we go to the next slide? Again, we will provide responses to all of the additional questions, but for now, we'd like to wrap up quickly and just share with you a resource that's available to each of you. So Svetlana, Lisa, and Sheila all serve on the faculty of the Pregnancy Prevention and Parenting Support Virtual Resource Center. And it is an online platform that is found in the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Exchange. Can you go to the next slide, Taisha? So we've provided some information, and we will send out a handout so that you could go to the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Exchange, become a member of the exchange, and access the Virtual Resource Center. We have a gambit of resources available. It acts as a repository. You could also request site-specific technical assistance or support from one of our many faculty areas, faculties that serve with the Virtual Resource Center. Again, it is on the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative Exchange, the virtual platform, and we would love for you to join us in that space to continue this conversation. Lisa, I'm going to pass it on to you to see if you have any final words to close us out.
All right, thank you, Tammy. I think I just want to really emphasize the exchange and the Virtual Resource Center that we have available. I think it's really unique in that our faculty members consist of young parents with lived experience, in addition to researchers and professionals currently working in the field. So it really bridges the gap among all those areas. And I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists for sharing all of this great information and for all of your insights. And thank you to all the participants for sharing your resources and questions and comments. Please connect with us on the exchange. That's it.